Hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for the Untangle Tech Talk series. Today we'll be demonstrating the virus blocker and spam blocker applications that are a part of our NG Firewall solution. My name is Shannon Miles and I'm part of the product marketing team here. I'll be your host today. John Coffin is here. He's our director of QA and he will be demonstrating these applications and how they work with our other applications today. So next slide, please, John. Thank you. So just a few housekeeping rules before I pass it over. If you have any audio issues, please make sure to use the audio panel on the right-hand side to select your preference. If you opt to use a phone, you will need to dial in and use the access code provided. Just a reminder, this webinar is being recorded, so you'll have the option to rewatch and revisit areas that you want to follow up on, and you can share it with your coworkers. And as always, we'll be answering questions throughout the presentation, so feel free to just submit any questions through the Q&A box. We have a couple team members on hand to help answer questions. And as always, you can always send us emails to sales@untangle.com and support@untangle.com if we do not get to your question. So now before I pass it over to John, just want to reiterate that this is a highly technical webinar. So if you're not familiar with the Untangle solution or networking concepts, I would suggest you take a look at our Untangle 101 webinar series that are more high level. You can find a full list of our webinars and upcoming webinars on our website. All right, so with that, I'll pass it over to John.
Thanks, Shannon. So thanks for joining us for this. Virus blocker and spam blocker are probably one of the easiest to configure. They do have some features that are more complicated to set up, and we'll kind of go over that on this. We'll start with virus blocker. Pretty simple. It will scan SMTP traffic, FTP, and HTTP by default. If you add the SSL inspector, you'll be able to inspect the encrypted TLS, SMTP for your mail servers if you're doing encrypted mail delivery and scan those for viruses. It will also scan HTTPS website traffic to see if there's any viruses on those. Kind of go over some of the light and paid. Personally, I use both. They're two different virus engines. The light is based on CLAM, which is an open source project, and then the paid is set on the rules from our Bitdefender partner. So in my experience is that it's always best to have multiple databases of viruses that you can scan against, and that because not any one virus protection will protect you from every virus out there. So the more different kinds of scanning that you do, the more chances that you're going to catch it, especially some of the newer ones. We'll also go over how it works with phishing blocker and the policy manager. So again, like I was said, you really need a multi-layer protection for virus blocker. You want to use both antivirus, the virus blocker, and virus blocker light on the Untangle. It's one of the rare exceptions where you want to have both. For example, you do not want to have both spam blocker and spam blocker light. That'll just cause issues and have all kinds of problems. But on virus blocker, you want to have the paid and the light version also. Adding to that layer of protection is our desktop product called Total Defense. It in turn uses yet another virus engine to check for viruses and protect your PCs directly. So again, like I'm talking about, is that you want to have a multi-layered approach to virus blocking because not any one solution will cover you fully. Let's take a look at how we configure the Untangle. So as you can see, I have both virus blocker and virus blocker light installed on here. Pretty simple, involved. You know, if there are cases where you don't want mail filtering, like let's say you don't have a mail server behind your Untangle, you can go ahead and uncheck it. It really won't make that much of a difference. FTP. There are certain websites for a while, some of the virus engines, in fact a couple of them that we saw, were marking Microsoft updates as viruses. It was kind of seemed a little bit humorous. So in this case, I've added some rules in there to allow the Windows updates to happen very quickly. Again, of course, you can select what kind of file extensions to scan fully. I recommend not checking them all because you'll kind of, it'll definitely tax whatever operating system, hardware that you have the Untangle running on. The more, and then they're going to more delays in downloading web pages and so forth. So if you see some really long delays and you checked all the boxes, that's probably the reason why. Again, reports will show you any kind of events that happen, and we'll go over that. So first thing I'll do is go ahead and try downloading a virus from a machine I have behind my Untangle. So I'll go ahead and make a call, and let's take a look. So if we go over here, it looks like the paid version caught it first. So a lot of times you'll see it where only one of these will catch the virus, and that's because it goes in sync. So the first one to catch the virus will block it from being processed for any more connections. So if you're looking at this and you see, well, for example, Virus Blocker Lite is catching all the viruses, and you say, well, why am I paying for Virus Blocker? You're kind of looking for the overlap there. So in this case, Virus Blocker Paid actually caught the bug in this case. And so if we go ahead and look at our report, and we're going to look at infected web events, we can see we have a website set up with some test viruses. And we can see that it was caught, and by clean it means that it disallowed the connection. So it stopped the connection once it detected that the virus was in this, the TCP traffic coming in. Pretty simple to do. Again, you can improve this by using SSL Inspector. If you have this enabled and have it set up, you can go ahead and do an HTTPS connection to it, and if it will decrypt it, check to see if there's a virus, block it, and then go on. You will do, if you're doing web connections, the user will actually see a block page that there was a virus detected, just so you know. Really simple to use. Again, your reports, you can set it up so you can see more than one day. Let's say I want to see a week's worth of data. I just change the start date, do the refresh, go on scan events. This machine hasn't been used very much, so we've only had the virus checks that I've initiated earlier today. Really simple to use, for example. So if I want to have the SSL Inspector, all I need to really do is turn it on. There's nothing to really check. We just got to make sure we have the certificates installed on all the machines behind there. And if you want to know more about installing SSL Inspector certificates on PCs, we have a webinar that we did about a month ago that's available on YouTube that shows how to install the certificates on different machines and how to enable them to use that effectively.
Hey, John.
But if you do turn it on, you'll have protection right away.
Hey, John, just a quick note. A lot of people are asking about SSL Inspector if it's a new application, so just want to address it. We renamed HTTPS Inspector to SSL Inspector in version 12.0 because it now scans SMTP over SSL. So I know that was a question that is kind of being brought up right now.
Yeah, good point. SSL Inspector is exactly the same as HTTP Inspector, except it has an additional feature that it now does port 25 and port 468 scanning. So if you have any reason that you want to inspect mail. Again, the new 12.0 will have SSL inspector. Really works exactly the same way to do it. Let's go back to the slide. So again, I can't emphasize the multi-layer protection for virus protection more and more highly than this. So definitely, you want to have antivirus on your PCs. You want to have antivirus on your firewall, and it's you should have pretty good coverage in that case. Again, some of the events that we went over, you can search for conditions. So if we go back to reports, again, we looked at the infected web reports. You'd also have mail events. You could also search for particular machines to see which ones are having the virus. You can narrow it down if you have quite a few to find out where they're coming from. Let's go back. Alerts, pretty useful item here for the antivirus. I've found it a lot of times, we might not catch one particular virus, but they tend, once you get one virus, it tends to download other ones. So what I've done on a lot of the systems that I use is I set up alerts for this. So if we go to reports and alert rules, you see this HTTP virus blocked. So I'll actually select that. So I'll go ahead and enable that. I'll go ahead and download another virus, and then it'll be blocked. And now if I go into reports, not only do I get an email that says that, hey, this computer tried to download a virus and we blocked it, which tells me I need to go to that computer and do full scanning on that machine because maybe it has other viruses involved there. And then also you'll have that in your alerts. So we take a look at reports and we look at our alert events, and we can see that an alert was emailed to me that says a virus was blocked. Makes it really useful that you can quickly catch machines that are infected and maybe isolate them and start antivirus procedures on that particular desktop. So not only will it help you prevent getting from the viruses, if a virus gets through, generally you'll start seeing some unusual traffic, and if you have that checked, it'll alert you to what machines may be having that problem. So that is pretty much the bulk of virus blocking. Again, really simple to configure, pretty easy to use. Everything's automatic. Spam blocker. Okay, so people have mail servers at their locations. They're looking to not only reduce their spam, but check the mail for viruses. Again, virus blocker will scan HTTP emails and check to see if they have viruses, block them if they are. They'll show up in the reports. For spam protection, again, it scans unencrypted SMTP. If you use TLS regularly, you'll need to add SSL inspector because that email is by definition encrypted and not scannable. So what we would do with SSL inspector is unencrypt the email, send it through virus blocker, phish blocker, spam blocker, and then send it back encrypted to your mail server. So it's a very secured way of inspecting that mail and getting it done. Some of the differences between light and paid versions of spam blocker. You have TLS inspection, which is kind of a huge thing now with more and more people going to encrypted email. The other parts of it are it uses a slightly different engine that I believe does a lot better weighing of the spam. Spam mail is all about like all different parts of the email, like where is it from, what's the content for it, how short is it, what kind of images does it have. Goes into a score, and then based on that score, this engine decides whether it's spam or not. So with all those pieces, I think the paid version does a lot better job of comparing the different parts of it, especially in content. Email content is probably one of the best ways to catch spam mail. So let's take a quick look on how to set that up. Again, you should only use one. Either use the paid version or use the light version. Do not use both. It causes huge amounts of problems with your mail server. It's really hard to track down problems when you have two. So I highly recommend that you only use, obviously if you have the paid version, use the paid version. If not, use the light. The paid version actually uses the engine from the light version with an additional configuration engine on top of it. So in a lot of ways, the paid version is just the light version with an additional feature. So we'll take a look at this. Really pretty simple to use. I just set it to extreme here so we can catch some spam mail that I'm going to send through it. Some other things to do, if you want to start scanning your email going out, generally it's not something you need. You can scan the outgoing mail. By default, we block TLS emails. Spammers have learned that you can bypass a lot of spam filters by just encrypting the mail to people's mail servers. So by default, we actually block TLS, which means any server that is trying to send email to you that does not, that will not step down from TLS will not be able to deliver mail. That's an important thing to know. It's kind of rare. Some banks, bank-to-bank emails will require TLS, but it's kind of a rare thing. So in this case, we'll go ahead and just do a simple simple spam sending. So let me go ahead and send some spam through my Untangle. And I've got a mail server on this. Oh, one thing I missed that I probably set up ahead of time, you're going to need port forward. So you go to networking and you port forward rules, and I have an SMTP forwarding. So if we look at this, it's really simple. I just say if a session comes in on port 25, I want to redirect it to my mail server, which is this internal address, and that's all I have to do. And now, as mail comes to my outside IP address, it'll be forwarded to my mail server. So go ahead and got some spam mail. Let's close this off. And let's take a look at our spam blocker. So if we go to reports and we'll look at our spam events, you can see, you know, this person just sent me a lot of spam. I went ahead and quarantined the messages, and now I can, you know, review those inside my quarantine. Super easy to use. This is kind of the simplest case where someone's just sending SMTP email to you and going on. Really easy to use. So where it gets complicated, we're going to start using encrypted mail. We want people to send us mail with encrypted TLS. So two things we have to do. First, we have to install SSL Inspector. The second part is we have to enable our rule for SMTP, and that's right here. So enable SMTP processing. Just to let you know, by default, that's going to be unchecked on 12.1. On 12, it's checked by default. Some people are having problems sending email out with SSL Inspector, so we decided to uncheck that. So we're set up. So I'm going to go ahead and try to send some encrypted mail to my server. So let's go here. I have one set up. So here's the key thing. I'm going to go ahead and do a TLS type email. So I'll go ahead and send email out. So we can see that SSL Inspector is doing this by looking at reports. So we're going to look at all sessions. So you can see I am unencrypting my port 25 traffic, and I'm inspecting that and sending that on through my spam blocker. So if we look at spam blocker, let's see, I don't think, oh, sorry, I did not allow, you have to allow TLS inspection if you're going to do that. So let's start that again. So, okay, now we're sending it through. This is all outlined also on our wiki, how to set up SSL inspection of your SMTP. So we'll go ahead and look at our emails. And again, we're quarantining the mail. We found the mail. And even though it's encrypted, we're able to decrypt it, check the email for spam. In this case, it was labeled spam, and do as, anything we need to do, what we decided to do. And that's all based here. So you can either quarantine, mark it, or literally drop it. I do recommend quarantine. Spam blockers, it's not exact science. There's a lot of fuzzy logic. So it's best if you're waiting on an email, it's nice to have a quarantine to look at those emails. Again, as you can see, it wasn't very hard to set up. There wasn't any kind of it's mostly just putting on the right switches, turning that on, and that's really covered on the wiki. Let's see what I can do. So let me just demonstrate if you don't have SSL Inspector. I'll go ahead but I'm going to allow TLS on my spam blocker. So this is a case where I need to receive TLS, but I don't have SSL Inspector. If I go ahead and send email again, one thing you'll notice is that the email goes through much faster because, of course, it's not being processed. So you'll notice that spam blocker does not even see the email that's going through there. That's because it's encrypted, so it can't scan it, and nothing's done to that. So that's the importance. If you're going to use TLS, highly recommend you use SSL Inspector to get that done. So let's take a look here real quick. Make sure. Tar pitting. What is tar pitting? So tar pitting means that we tell the mail server that we accepted the email, but we actually dropped the email. And that happens when you get a spam rating high enough where it's obviously spam, and you want to do that. So enabling tar pitting helps in two things, because if the spammer on the other end is receiving notice that their email was stopped or was rejected, they're going to try a different email and just sometimes pound your email server until they accept an email. Sometimes they even try to overwhelm resources. By enabling tar pit, it enables the Untangle to just drop the mail right away because it's obviously spam, and save the load on your mail server. So it really enables you to have better control and able to not have your mail server get overloaded on that. One of the classic ways of doing it. We went over the SSL inspection, so let's go see if we have any questions we can answer for you.
Hey, John. So there's some questions about spam blocker. A question about what super spam is.
Yeah, super spam is pretty much when your spam rating is so high that it's coming from a known spam IP address. It has all the markings of the contacts as super spam. So that is one of the things, you just go ahead and just drop super spam. The connection's not made. It kind of saves a huge load. It's just a quick way of getting rid of obviously spam email. And that's one of the easiest ways to do that. And it makes it pretty easy. Again, it's one of those things to save the resources on your mail server so it doesn't get overwhelmed and you start having problems with your mail server. Let's see some other questions here.
Hey, John, there's a question about if in the event a message that was blocked by spam blocker is a real message, is there a way to mark it so that it can be delivered to the mail server?
So this is one of the things. So if the email is dropped, it can't be, that means it doesn't exist. We don't keep it on the Untangle. It's pretty much lost. That's why I highly recommend setting it for quarantine, because once you have it set for quarantine, you can go ahead and each user will have their own quarantine location. The administrator can go ahead and see everyone's quarantine. So for example, obviously he's quarantined quite a few emails. So these two people actually have their own quarantine mailbox that they can in turn view. So I can look at my emails and I said, oh, yeah, I definitely want 2 Domino's pizzas. So I want to go ahead and just release that. And the administrator can do that, or actually the individual, because when they get it quarantined, each morning they'll get an email saying, hey, you have some spam in your quarantine. If you want to look at it, there'll be a link where they can look at that on your Untangle. If they don't do anything for 30 days, the email is dropped and it's lost forever. So that's why I recommend quarantine. Spam blocking is not an exact science. It's really hard to tell, even for humans, if this is a spam or a real email sometimes. So I recommend the quarantine. It's an easy way to save off these emails, and then the user either can go through them and check which ones he wants and forward them back to his mailbox, or the administrator can go in and make some editing on each of the mailboxes. There was one question about the logs are stored on Untangle. All the logs are stored on the Untangle itself. It's in the database. You can download it. There's 2 ways you can download that. So if you go to, let's say I want to go all my events, I can either export them right here, and it turns out it exports them to a CVS, or I can use, where is it? Oh, don't have it installed. I can actually store that on my Google Drive using the backups. Where is it? Directory connector is what I need. Right here. So if I have directory connector and I set that up with my Google Drive, I can export my logs to my Google Drive and keep those for as long as I need to do it. And again, the logs are how long they're kept is based on your report setting, and it is right here on data. So by default it's 7. This is all dependent on how big your hard drive is and how much traffic is going through your machine. I have some machines pretty small, hard drives in them, very little traffic. It's only about 2 or 3 users behind it, and I can put 365 days without any problem. Let's see, any other questions that we can see really quick. You can just limit email to your domain. There's a couple of ways to do that, and this will prevent getting a quarantine for people outside your area. By default, your quarantine addresses is star, which means any address. So if someone sends an email to your mail server and for example, it's for food.com and it's spam, someone at food.com is actually going to get an email, even though. So what you can do is go ahead and change this and say, I want any email going to food.com. So in that case, if the recipient is not in the domain food.com, I won't get, they won't create a quarantine for it. The email will just be simply dropped. Someone said here, do they need spam blocker if you're using Google Apps? No, Google actually has their own anti-spam, and before you even see your mailbox, it's already been filtered. Again, Google Apps, pretty much the only way to get the email off that is either through the web or through IMAP, and spam blocker does not scan IMAP or POP. It only scans SMTP, which means you have a mail server behind your Untangle. Let's see any others. As far as recommendations for we really spent a lot of time on a lot of the default settings as installed. So I would really recommend sticking with the default settings, like somebody listed about concurrent connections. Definitely go with whatever defaults that we go on here. If you start seeing, heavy loads on your machine, you might want to cut that down, or if you think you have more bandwidth because you have a quite large box running Untangle, go ahead and make adjustments to that. Really start off with our defaults and then adjust them as it needs to. Is there a way to quarantine or block an entire set? Probably the most effective way to block emails is just make sure that you've set your domain for your mail server in that quarantine area. That way you won't get any of those emails from that area.
Hey John, there's some questions about gray listing. There's a few questions that came up. If you could go over that.
Yeah, gray listing, I highly, highly recommend you take a look at the documentation on there. Gray listing is pretty much if the email looks slightly like spam, it's going to say, it's going to basically say to the person sending the email saying, please try later. And generally, spam senders don't try later, but most legitimate mail servers do. So that's a way of kind of reducing that marginal spam mail so you actually get it through. So that's the problem with gray listing is you will see delays in getting email. I mean, the delays is based on the sender's mail server. So for example, if I'm a company called Acme, but I'm getting mail from food.com. If I gray list and their email looks slightly like spam, it's going to say try later. And let's say the mail server at food.com is set to only retry once a day. The email that was sent to me will only get to me. It will get to me a day later because of gray listing. So it's a very it can have some really drastic side effects. So definitely, you can definitely try it, but if you're starting to see a lot of delays in important email, it might be a good thing to turn that off. But we have a whole spiel on how gray listing and what happens with that. It's definitely worth reading. It's quite a long document, but it's very clear on that. Let's see what else we have. That looks like most of the questions. Somebody had a question: allow or ignore TLS sessions. So if you're not running SSL Inspector, you do not want that checked. So by default, that is unchecked, which means you will not receive TLS email. And we're talking about this setting right here. By default, it comes like this. So you will, it will prevent TLS connections to your mail server. Spammers have learned that if they send their spam encrypted, it's more likely chance to get through their the mail filters. So a lot of the spam is TLS now. Again, if you have SL Inspector, check that to allow and ignore TLS sessions, and then use SL Inspector to use that. Yeah, definitely. You can upload your own SSL certificate. The thing is, you really need, you can't have multiple ones, so you're going to have to use the Untangle for TLS until the next version, which is 12.1, which will allow you to have multiple certificates for different usage. So that will work on 12. Let's see what else. Anything else?
Looks like that's the majority of the questions, John, unless we get some last-minute ones. If you want to head back to the slides.
Okay. One thing I'm going to bring up is definitely post your questions to the forums. Most of the engineers are on the forums pretty regularly. We're pretty quick to answer questions. A lot of these questions are very specific a lot of times to your particular network. So the more information you can provide how your network works, the better we can provide the information.
Yeah, great. Thanks, John. As John mentioned, we also have the wiki, the different wiki pages that is also supported by the engineering team, so all the information's there. If you still need help configuring your network or installing these apps, we do offer professional services to help with that. So just, give us an email, give us a call, and we can help you set up your network correctly. If you want to go to the next slide, John. And then just want to reiterate, I've mentioned this special offer a few times, so probably one of the last times I offer it. We have a special offer going on, our new U25 and U25W appliance that we released a few months ago. It's perfect for small and home offices. If you purchase this with a complete package, you'll get free 25 device 1-year license for Total Defense Antivirus for endpoints, which is kind of what John was talking about earlier, where you kind of need some sort of antivirus solution. So check that offer out on our website. And yes, this webinar was recorded. All of our webinars are posted on our YouTube channel. You can check that out on our website. We have a little button that goes to our YouTube channel in the footer if you can't find it, or if you go to our webinars page. We have tons of resources, the wiki, the forums. You can email us. We have our next webinar is on application control on July 21st, and our WAN balancer and WAN failover applications on August 11th. So please be sure to check those out if you're interested and want to learn a little bit more about those applications. As always, we like feedback. If you have a specific topic in mind for Tech Talks, please just email us and let us know. We want to make sure we provide you guys with enough information to get your networks up and running. So thanks, John, for the great demonstration. Thanks, team, for answering the questions, and we hope you guys enjoyed this webinar. See you next time.